No matter where you live, if you go back in time far enough, it probably looked like this. A wooded area with lots of trees, shrubs, and grasses, all of them natural sponges to slow down rainfall and to soak it up. But as we develop our communities, we first thin the trees, and then we put in an impervious surface, also known as a roadway. We then further thin the trees and start development on homes. The homes multiply fast. Then the streets multiply fast, and so do the neighborhoods. When you take all of the homes with their rooftops, patios, the pavement, the sidewalks, and the lack of trees, you're allowing rainwater to hit the ground harder, run off faster and farther, and create issues that maybe 10 or 20 years ago weren't so much of an issue, simply because of impervious surfaces and development.
This creek is part of a natural drainage system that occurs all over the earth. It's within what's called a watershed. I'm standing in a watershed now. You live in a watershed. Now, a watershed is basically a collection basin, a bowl or a bathtub that takes all the water that falls in a geographical area and brings it downstream. A lot of that water that falls within that watershed, whether it be rain or sleet or snow or even fog, soaks into the ground initially. It goes through the layers of soil and minerals, it's cleansed and filtered, and eventually recharges aquifers. The rest of it is flowing on the surface. Now, when we interrupt that flow and that natural absorption of the rainwater, we start to put more of the water on the surface. This happens a lot when we change the watershed areas from natural areas to paved areas or impermeable areas. As we said, when water hits a natural area, that water will soak into the ground and some of it will run off. This lake behind me is part of that catch basin, part of that watershed we talked about. This collects streams and rivers and eventually goes into a bay. But when man changes the surface through construction or development and that surface becomes impermeable, that water cannot soak in. It has to go on the surface and run downhill. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I take some water and it falls in a natural area, you can see how it's soaked in totally. But if that area is not permeable, if it does not allow water to soak in, this is what happens. Everything runs off the surface. Nothing soaks in.
I'm standing in a very interesting neighborhood. It's what we call a walkable neighborhood. But one of the things about this neighborhood is that it has a high amount of imperviousness. Now, you all have heard about imperviousness. It's any hard surface that keeps water from going down into the soil. So that's a problem because that water then runs off after rainstorms. It goes into our bays and bayous, and if enough rain falls, it certainly contributes to our flooding. So in most cases, we certainly like to limit the amount of imperviousness that we see. Now, in terms of why this is a flood-friendly development, number one, because this uses a lot less space. So if we took all the people that live in this development, this is about 7 acres right here, and we put them out on the prairie in your more typical suburban houses, instead of 7 acres, we would require 130 acres. So that's 130 acres of land that absorbs water, of prairie, of wetlands, of forest, and even farmland. So that's land that we would lose. So these people are flood friendly because they didn't pave over that kind of land. Secondly, these people are responsible for a lot less runoff because they are in such a smaller area. Now, it's true that there's more runoff per acre in this spot, but there's less runoff for all the people that are here. So again, if these same people were out in the prairie, and they had developed in a standard suburban form out there, they would generate about 4 million cubic feet of runoff per year. Whereas here, they are only responsible for about 500,000 cubic feet of water in this area. So they reduce runoff by 85% just by living here.